Welcome. I'm Dr. Liz, an entrepreneur, speaker, podcaster, mom, and wife. This podcast is about hypnosis, but also about all kinds of ways to help you live your fullest life, to heal, transform, to play the long game and go after the joy. You can see more about me at drlizhypnosis.com. Hop over there to get a free hypnosis file to decrease fear and anxiety, or one to increase emotional stability. They're there just for you. I hope you enjoy the podcast as much as I do. Peace. Hi everyone, Dr. Liz here. I have known Todd Smith for many, many years now and have sat in on his free sessions of what we call The Work by Byron Katy. And it's really an inquiry process where you ask these questions and you have a facilitator to help you work through your answers to those questions. Well, Todd is the facilitator. He is truly skilled at holding the space and helping people do the work. And he's also such a kind, compassionate individual. So I have asked some really hard questions. There was one question I asked at one of the free sessions where I was crying, other people were crying. It was quite emotional. And Todd was kind and compassionate and just truly held the space for me to continue with the inquiry process until it felt complete to me. And that's Todd on the regular. That is how he is. So when I heard that he recently launched a podcast called Wiggle Room, which we're going to talk about, I was like, oh my gosh, please come on my podcast. I would love to have you be a guest and help people find out just a different way of working through a question they have or a stuck point in their life or something that they're struggling with. So I hope you find this episode helpful. That's always my hope for a podcast episode in terms of discovering another way to heal, to transform, to get unstuck or move forward in your life in a way that's helpful for you. Peace. Hi, Todd. Welcome to the Hypnotize Me podcast.
Hey, thank you. It's great to be here.
I was so excited to have you on because I've been attending your free sessions for a couple of years now, I think. I've been a big fan of yours for quite a while. And so I was really excited to hear that you launched a podcast where people can access the work that you do with people, the work that people do with you in a really easy way, actually, and get some real benefit from that.
Awesome. Well, it's great to be here with you. And I'm excited about having a podcast as well. I'm sort of following in your footsteps, it seems.
Yeah. Oh, and before we move on, the podcast is called Wiggle Room with Todd Smith.
Yep, it's available anywhere, Wiggle Room, and we'll get into it a little bit, but it's the idea that there's a little bit of wiggle room always available in any situation. And we kind of put our attention in that direction, and sometimes that wiggle room can expand quite a lot to be giving more freedom in situations that seemed impossible.
For sure. I love the name, actually, because it is this feeling sometimes when you begin to look at different perspectives of just finding a little bit of difference there, a little wiggle room that feels more comfortable emotionally, mentally. And then once that happens, I think some even more major shifts can happen once you find that little bit at the beginning.
Yeah.
Exactly. So can you tell us how you originally got into what we call The Work by Byron Katy?
Okay, sure. Yeah. The Work of Byron Katy was not something I was looking for, but I was having difficulties with in my relationship, my partner. And this was back in 2006. And I was hoping, looking, wishing there was something more to go into. And ironically enough, he recommended Byron Katy. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and he goes, she's the real deal, So I remember him saying that. And I was in a Barnes and Noble in Richmond, Virginia, back in the day, and I found the book "Loving What Is" by Byron Katy, and so it's just a cool little title, and I thought, let me read it. Let's see. As I read that book, I started getting really excited, and it felt like this was something that I'd kind of been missing, and it was just an invitation to get really truthful, really honest with yourself, and go into places where I thought it would be too scary to get into. So I read it, I got really excited, and then I started planning. Okay, I'm gonna make this a practice of mine, because I've been doing meditation for many years, and that's also a practice of mine. But I
Hmm.
felt like this is something on a par with that I wanted to add.
Hmm.
So I waited until till January 1st, 2007, and then I said, "Today's the day I start my practice," and I've been pretty darn regular since that
Wow.
time.
Okay. When you say a practice, is it that you do the inquiry every morning or not necessarily morning, but sometime during the day? Is that what you mean
Yeah,
by
pretty much.
practice?
I do it about 5 days a week, and I do it for probably half hour to an hour, depending on my schedule. And right now, I've built it into my workday. I actually, it's the first thing I do when I start my workday, and it's just a really nice beginning to the day that I start.
Fantastic. I could totally see that, like starting the day with that. I tend to start my day with meditation and a little yoga, but yeah, sometimes journaling, but this could fall into quote unquote journaling if you're doing an inquiry.
Yeah, this is like if you're doing this in written form, it can be done written or spoken with a partner. But if you're doing it in a written form, journaling is like the first step of it because you're getting the stuff out, you're getting the
Hmm.
raw material out onto paper. And then this just takes it to the next step. It was once I've got some of my stressful thoughts out on paper from, say, journaling, then I can look at one of those thoughts and begin to question it in a really simple and systematic way that starts to often open my perspective about what I was seeing.
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. So before we jump into what the inquiry actually is, when did you decide to get trained?
Um, that happened 2010. I had been kind of inching my way towards this more and more as I'd been doing. I'd been listening to Byron Katy. I'd been doing the work myself and getting more and more interested in it. And I didn't really have the money to go to any seminars or do a lot of things in that direction. But after my mother passed away and I did get a little extra money, I thought, you know what? I think I would like to actually do this work. And actually, it's kind of funny how it happened. I was a professional photographer for about 7 years,
Oh, wow. I
and
didn't know that.
yeah, and I love photography. But I had gone from wedding photography into nature photography because of a move. My whole clientele was gone after I moved to a new place. And I
Mhm.
was really passionate about nature photography and I was doing a lot with it, but wasn't making much money. And I was feeling some stress about that. So that was one of the things I did the work on. In fact, one time I did the work with Byron Katy herself. And the turnarounds that came out of that piece of work sort of pointed me in like, well, if it's not working, why do I have to keep trying?
Yeah.
Because I've been
Yeah.
trying really hard.
Yeah.
So I kind of stopped, and then I worked for another company for a while, and then after my mom died, I had some money, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go into this and make this my job, and I've been doing that ever
Mm,
since.
great. Great. I think how I got introduced to you, I'm trying to remember. My friend Katya, I know it was through her, but did she meet you at a training or did she just know about your work? Because she did the training.
Yeah, yeah. I think we just know each other virtually. If we did meet in person, it was very briefly because I don't remember it very clearly.
Okay. Okay. So she describes these training as pretty intense actually. It's is it 10 days or
Yeah, 9 days. Yeah,
9
Byron Katie's
days?
9 day school for the work. It's been off during COVID, but if it ever comes back online, it's definitely worth attending for sure.
Okay. All right. So then you began offering the services professionally?
She also has a program for training people to become like facilitators of the work. And so that's like a more involved program that starts with the School for the Work, that 9-day program, but then goes on and has many courses and training exercises. So that took me a couple of years to go through. But even then, like the work of Byron Katy, and I love this about the way she structured it's free. It's free for anyone to use in any way. You don't have to get trained to use it. You can use it professionally. And so even while I was in that training program, I was already starting to see clients and starting to kind of move in the direction of doing it full time.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, and it is free, which I really love about it. I mean, you can easily Google it up, but you have the worksheets and the basic stuff on your website, theworkismeditation.com. So people could go there and just download it for free if they wanted and begin to do it themselves. And I know for myself, I've always appreciated that you've run free sessions. Is it once a week or twice a week?
Once a week. Yeah.
Once a week.
Open sessions, which are free to anyone and are a lot of fun.
Yes, the most interesting questions get asked. In fact, I think I attended them pretty regularly for, I don't know, a year or so. And I think I only asked 1 or 2 questions myself, but it's like just to listen was so helpful. And also as well as the chat. So I remember the one question I was asking and someone had put in the chat, she was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, this is really my question as well. So the work you're doing is helping me. So I always found that really supportive, really lovely, really helpful. I see it as like a resource when I'm feeling stuck in an area and I don't feel like I can get out of it. Like I'm stuck, really, like I'm feeling stuck. And it's like, okay, I know I could go to a free session that Todd's offering and just ask that question, or perhaps just listen and even feel unstuck. So let's jump in more into what those questions are. Can you lay out just a basic inquiry for the listeners?
Yeah. Sure. So the basic format is always the same. And it's also one of the things I like about it. It's just solid. It's one of those things that doesn't change.
True.
So first step is identify a situation that's stressful. It could be a minor little situation or it could be a big deal. You find a situation, the more specific you are about it, the easier it is to get a handle on what it is, how to get into that. So once you have a situation, then you start looking at what are the thoughts that I'm believing in that moment. And Byron Katy has a great worksheet called the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. So if you want
it's a great title. It's not a not judge your neighbor worksheet. It's a judge your neighbor worksheet, right? Like, where are your judgments coming out?
So this is just for kind of like finding what are my thoughts in that situation. So I found a situation and what am I thinking? Who am I judging? What are the thoughts that are going on inside of me where I'm kind of arguing with the way things are, arguing with reality? And so however you do that, either use the worksheet or do free form, write down your stressful thoughts. You come up with some of the thoughts that are causing that feeling of stress inside. And then you just trust that and write them down verbatim. Like they'll be immature. They'll sound really childish. They'll be like, oh, I don't really believe that, but that emotion is telling me that I do believe that. I am connected to that and it's stressing me. So I like to get real honest and just allow myself to get that thought really as it is onto paper, basically. So that's the first step, is to get the thought, find the thought to question. And once I have a thought to question, then I'm going to go through these 4 questions and turnarounds, which allow me to begin to explore the thought. So the questions are, is it true? So, she, like, you can find anything, like, he doesn't respect me. And is it true? And then, can you absolutely know it's true? He doesn't respect me. In this situation, even when he interrupted me, he doesn't respect me. Is that true? Can I absolutely know it's true? So it's like another second chance to look at that.
Yeah, that part reminds me of check the facts. I do a lot of dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, from
Yeah.
Marsha Linehan is the creator of that. It's check the facts. Is this true? And then often when you go through the flow chart, it's like, actually, we don't know if this is true or not.
Right. Right.
So
That's
yeah,
a
I
huge
always
one. I
love
mean,
that.
that filter right there can catch probably 50% of what's going on, because like there's so many times when the mind either exaggerates something or just tells a story that it's a certain way when you really just don't know, so check the facts. I love it.
For sure.
That's
Yes.
what we're
Is
doing.
it true? Do you know
Is
it's
it
true? Yeah.
And in case it's still true after when you answer, is it true? It's still a yes. Then Byron Katie gives you one more chance to look, like, can you absolutely know it's true? Just like get in there one more time and see for sure. And sometimes it's a yes, like many times. So this is not about pulling the wool over my eyes and pretending, oh no, everything's fine. That really didn't happen. It's not like that. It's not about going into denial. It's about getting in touch with what's my experience. Is that true? Is that really true? Are you sure? And if it is, great. If it isn't, good to know. So those are the first two questions. The third question is a very interesting one. It's, how do you react? What happens when you believe this thought? So when I'm thinking, that he doesn't respect me in the moment when he's interrupting me, then I become angry. I become short. I may become passive aggressive. I may be reminded of other times when that happened. I may want to get away. Like, there's so many reactions that can happen. And physically, I may feel a tightness in my heart or my stomach or any kind of physical sensation. So these are reactions. And the point of that question is to notice what's going on for you. When I think that thought in that situation, look what happens to me. I become closed. I become angry. I become mean, basically.
Yeah.
And so it's like, whoa, I didn't realize, I thought it was all about the situation, but this is what happens when I believe that thought.
Yeah. And it's really about tuning into your own reactions. So for some people, it could go across the board. Some people, it could be shut down. I withdraw. I do that type of thing. If I believe that thought. Yeah,
exactly.
So it's really tuning in. Okay, what happens when I step into believing this thought?
Right. It's like awareness. Without awareness, I'm having those reactions anyway, but I'm not really paying attention to it. I'm just like on automatic pilot. But this process is a meditative process. It slows me down and has me look and see what's actually happening. Like, oh, wow, that's amazing how powerful that is. I'm reacting in all these ways.
Yes.
Yeah. So then the fourth question is, who would you be without that thought? And you look at the same situation, and this is hypothetical now. Like, you have to imagine, okay, he interrupted me. And then imagine, who would I be when he interrupts me if I don't have the thought, he doesn't respect me?
Yeah.
And the mind starts to open. It's like it starts to feel like the way friends are. Friends interrupt each other all the time. There's no stress in that. There's no feeling of anger in that.
Yeah.
As you imagine what it would be like without the thought, then you describe your experience and play with that. And so question 4, who would you be without the thought, is like and question 3, how do I react? These two together kind of provide a way of comparing and contrasting the experience. Same experience. Person's interrupting me, but one's with the thought, he doesn't respect me, and the other's without the thought, he doesn't respect me. And you get to see what a difference just having one thought can make.
Yeah. So that's where the wiggle room comes in.
That's right.
It's like, all right, let's look at it now from a different perspective, or just slightly to the side, even like stepping slightly to the side, just figuring out, in this example, how would I treat my partner if I didn't believe that they don't respect me, even if they interrupt me?
Yeah. That same situation, I might start listening. Like, what is he saying? That maybe something important. I may be interested or curious about him, rather than defensive and shut down when I'm believing he doesn't respect me. So
yeah. I mean, I can see all kinds of different perspectives pop up there, right? Like perhaps they're excited, or they're passionate about
Yeah,
something, or I don't know, they're ADD and they have a hard time waiting and holding on to that. Or
totally.
it's funny that you pick that, because this is like an ongoing thing with my own partner, is this interrupting. And sometimes it's like, I say, you need to take some notes because I'm not done talking yet, so that you can track, like a real practical suggestion there.
Mm,
Because sometimes, the reaction is like, but I'm going to forget what I want to say if you continue to talk and I don't get to interrupt you, like this type of thing. I think it is.
right. Options are there, right? You start to be able to communicate. There's not this anger pushing me to a shutdown or a stalemate or some kind of a difficult situation. So that's the difference. When I'm attached to the thought, when I'm believing the thought, when I'm totally caught up in that thought of he doesn't respect me, I can see nothing.
Uh-huh.
It's just
Yeah.
black, you can almost see the
Right.
lead.
Right. Yeah. But I've seen these 4 questions that sound very basic. I've seen them applied through listening to you, and not just you, but I've followed the work in different ways as well. But I've seen them applied to really, really important situations. Actually, this one could be very important too, because I won't say it's not, because if you continue to believe your partner doesn't respect you, then that could lead to dissolution of the relationship eventually.
It is. Yeah. These things start small, but they build, and they become big, big stories over time, and they can become really nasty
Yes.
situations. They can become violent even. You can understand once you start playing with how do I react and you see your own little reactions, you start to understand, even have compassion for the worst criminals that end up doing terrible things. They've been believing their thoughts unquestioned and building a story of victimhood so large that it just breaks out into something
Mm-hmm.
really terrible. So we're doing something really important here, even if it seems
Yes.
small. But it's the building blocks for bigger things and even big situations, big traumas in life, big issues. They also can be worked in this way. The questions are the
Mm-hmm.
same, 4 questions, simple, seems like nothing. But what makes it interesting is are the answers that come out and the self-discovery that happens
Yes.
here.
And I am always surprised and fascinated by how individual those are in people. So it's like, even listening to someone, let's say, ask a question, do an inquiry, and work through the process. It's like I have my own set of thoughts that come out as I'm following along, and rarely do they match the person's set of thoughts or solutions that they come up with. Like
Yeah.
if you don't believe that thought, then who are you? Like, what do you choose to do? How do you choose to react? Are always very different, let's say, than mine would be.
Yeah. And so one of the things as a facilitator of the work that I do, and Byron Katy has kind of encouraged us to do, is to really stand back. Like, we're not in the job of therapy here. We're in the job of holding a space for someone to do their own meditation. And so we just hold that space, and then that person goes in and sees what they see. They may see something very different than what I
Yes.
was seeing. And so, yeah, that's a really important
Yeah. And
point.
I think that's an important difference to point out as well, because you are truly holding the space for someone to come up with their own thing. And like a psychotherapist or a psychologist, I mean, most good ones, we're going to hold the space as well. But there is a little bit, not a little bit, there's often a lot extra that we do in there in terms of, um, deciding with the person, like, is that action effective for you? Is it helpful or is it unhelpful? Does it disturb your life? Does it lead to a path of pain, or does this lead to making your emotional, physical, mental health better? So I think with the
Yeah.
work, it's really focused more on the inquiry and doesn't really take that step. It is more of a holding space, and then the person goes and decides what they want to do with it themselves.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the difference, like a psychotherapist or someone doing a therapy has a lot of training. and has a lot of information and knowledge to bring to the table. And so that's a very different kind of
Mhm.
support. Whereas this is, I don't have training in psychology. I don't have that kind of background. I don't have that wealth of information to guide somebody in a particular way. Instead, I trust that they will find what works for them, what makes sense to them, and they will kind of explore on their own. And I'm just there to keep them in that
Yes.
process. And then it is often amazing what they see, but it can be complementary to other
Yes.
things like therapy. So that's
Yeah,
the
for
beauty of it.
sure. Yeah. So I know you don't just offer the free sessions, you also have retreats and workshops that you offer. Can you tell us some about those?
Yeah, for sure. Probably my biggest workshop is called the Work 101, which is a an online course. It's 9 weeks long, although I have a slow version of it that's 9 months
Uh-huh.
for busy people.
I like the slow version
But
option. Right. Yeah.
yeah, it definitely has become popular because a lot of
Hmm.
people are busy. But either way you take it, it's the same course, and we start right from the beginning. What is the work? What are the basics of it? And then we move right into writing some of these judge your neighbor worksheets, identifying stressful thoughts to question, and then actually questioning them. So it builds a practice over 9 weeks or 9 months of doing the work, dipping into the work on a regular basis with support. So as you're doing the work, you learn, okay, yeah, oh, that is the work, that isn't the
Hmm.
work, this is how you do it, this isn't how you do it. And you kind of gain experience in the group situation. So that's my most popular and probably the one that I put the most attention on because uh, my interest in supporting people in the work is to make it something that they can have and
Hmm.
take with them and have for themselves whenever they need it, and to start to build something that is not just for emergencies only, but something that, like I do, like sort of
Hmm.
once a day or once a week, somehow uh, an ongoing support. So that's the main one. Now, the other thing I offer are virtual retreats, and I do this on Zoom. And I do this a couple times a year where we have 24 hours a day, around the
Wow.
clock. We have sessions, 2 hour sessions every
Really?
three
Like all
hours,
through the night, even?
and all through the night. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm not
okay. I
doing
was like,
all of them.
wow.
I do all the day ones in my time zone, but I have a group of people that I've trained and worked together with called Inquiry Circle, and they're all over the world, and so we have different participants from
Cool.
that group lead some of the sessions for the European times, Australian times,
Got
and
it.
that kind of thing. So yeah, once you get the hang of it, anyone can do
Uh-huh.
this. You don't, like I said, you don't have to be an expert. And then when we come together as a group, we often build on each other and we often learn and go deeper as a result.
Fascinating. And do you offer privates as well? You do.
I do. Yes, I do. I currently am offering private sessions once 1 week per month. So it's not super available, but during that 1 week, that's
Oh,
all I do.
interesting. How
So
did you come
uh,
up with that?
um,
Like the 1 week a month?
that was just out of practicality because I do spend a lot of time organizing the courses that I teach and the just managing the inquiry circle and managing all the different
Uh-huh.
aspects of running a business and as well as setting up more and more training programs, doing a podcast, all those things
They
that
do.
take a lot of
Yeah.
time. So it just made sense to me to focus on one thing during 1 week, and then focus on other things during other times. Just
I
kept it
love it.
simpler for me.
I love hearing about, I don't know, alternative, let me call it that way. Alternative like business models, quote unquote, or really it's like work models. I heard of a therapist,
Yeah,
this is years ago in California, where she would take 1 week off of every month. Not like, 2 weeks a year or 4 weeks a year, whatever. It was 1 week off every single month. So she'd run clients, 3 weeks of the month and then everybody got a week off. And so it just always stuck with me. So when you said that, it's like, it sounds very similar. Like I'm going to do concentrated individual private sessions 1 week of the month and give my full to that is what I'm hearing, my full attention. And then the rest of the time I manage my workshops and inquiry circle and all of that. I love it. That's cool.
Yeah, it kind of works. I'm not like jumping in and out from one to the other all the time. So it's like when I'm in, I'm really in. When I'm out, I'm really out.
It's really like focused attention. Yeah. Did you come up with that through the work? That my mind just goes there. Like, how do I, like at some point you ask the question.
As you get in the kind of habit of questioning things through the work, these little questions sort of hover around you and sort of they're there for you to question anything. Like, yeah, I have to work every week. Is it true? And maybe it's not true. And how do I react when I believe that thought? I feel obliged. And who would I be without that thought? Exploring new possibilities. So that's
great.
Yeah. I don't think I actually formally did the work on that statement, but it must have been running around in there because it somehow opened to that possibility.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great.
So that brings us to the last part of the work, which I haven't described yet, which is called the turnarounds.
Oh, yes, and the turnarounds. Thank you.
They're a great piece of the work here. They're basically asking the question, could the opposite be true? So I've got the original statement, he doesn't respect me. So could the opposite be true? And we don't actually ask that question. We just say, can you find a turnaround? And so there are usually more than one turnaround for any given statement.
Yeah. Again, this is always surprising to me. Like sometimes the turnaround seems so opposite. Yeah. And I actually love how you will slow people down because once you do get the questions down, sometimes you go immediately to the turnaround. And it's like, no, that's actually not the process. And when you do slow it down, that first instinct turnaround isn't always the most helpful one.
Yeah, what happens, we all like to take shortcuts. And so we think, okay, yeah, he doesn't respect me, turn it around, he does respect me. Like we just flip it, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't really have the same effect as sitting meditatively and going through the 4 questions. Can you absolutely know it's true? And how do I react? And who would I be? Like that process of going through those questions starts to loosen my attachment to the thought a little bit because I start to see that it's not really working for me. And I'm starting to be open to maybe exploring a turnaround. But if I just flip to the turnaround, it can sometimes just kind of slap me in the face and it doesn't feel meditative. It just feels like, oh, I'm trying to convince myself that something's not true, but it is. And
true.
Yeah. But when I go through the process slowly and carefully, then by the time I get to the turnarounds, my mind is often more open and I can start to feel into those turnarounds a little bit. So like he doesn't respect me. He does respect me. That would be an opposite. So how could it be that even when he's interrupting me, he is respecting me? And some of the stuff you found in question 4 may start to illuminate that as well. Like, oh, maybe he's just excited, or maybe he's like preoccupied with something. And I'm thinking he's judging me or he's cutting me off, but it's not as personal as that. He's feeling rushed and needs to get on to the next thing. So every situation will be different, but you'll start to find examples or start to look for examples of how those turnarounds could be true. And often there's a lot of truth in these opposites. It's surprising, but it's very common, very common.
Right. Yeah. And it's really interesting to me because again, in DBT, we have opposite action. So we do check the facts and let's say, we get to this and it's like, okay, no, that's not true. Consider opposite action. Would it be helpful here? And it reminds me of that, like turnaround, like opposite action for, let's say anger is moving into a state of calm or taking a break, taking a step back, like something like that. So the turnarounds, I don't know. I just always see parallels there with what would happen if, you believe the turnaround, what would happen as well.
You just
Like,
play with them. You see, okay, what would happen if I believe this? And we have, sometimes we call what we call living turnarounds, which is similar to what you're just talking about, of something I could actually do in that situation. And, so I might think he doesn't respect me, and I might think that he should really listen to me, like really pay attention to me, like make eye contact, so
mhm.
I could make that my turnaround, like my active turnaround, where I'm actually making eye contact and listening to him, and it might transform the whole experience in that
Yes.
moment. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it's really, really lovely to figure out those possibilities.
Yeah.
It is a sense of freedom, I think. For me, I speak for myself, but I seem to hear that in a lot of people too who do the work. It's like it is a sense of freedom when you see that there's just possibilities to choose from. You're not completely stuck on one path, whether that's action in the real world or whether that's in your heart and mind.
Yeah. How you see it and options for acting. When you start seeing more possibilities there, the experience is greater freedom. So I don't have to depend on the situation changing, which is what we often do depend on, either the situation changing or me going out and changing the situation, which is also a valid form of acting in the world, where I'm actually trying to fix something, do something, change something. Yeah, that's great. But there are things that we can't control. And so when that happens, what do? I try to change something, I can't change it. I'm up against an
Yeah.
illness, or I'm up against some powerful person. But when I do the work, I can always find that wiggle room inside of myself where I can change how I see that. Like, oh, maybe it's not as bad a thing as I thought, or maybe there's an option here that I didn't see. And that's what this process is about.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. Absolutely. And we do get into hot water sometimes when we're trying to change another person or something that's not in our control. It's like, oh, that's really not in my control. I mean, I can set intentions about my own behavior and how I act, but it is really difficult if we're expecting somebody else to change in this particular way, and maybe they don't want to. Who knows?
Yeah.
Like when it comes back to your own behavior, you have a lot more control
A
there.
lot more control. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even within that, like if it starts to be stressful that I'm trying to change my own behavior and I'm unable to do that, which is also
Yeah.
can happen, then the work can be applied to that as well. And then it's like I can just pull back a little more to what Byron Katy sometimes calls my business versus your business, or my business versus God's business. Like what I can't control is everyone else's business. What I can control is my business, which is often just how I see it. So I may be able to act, I may not be able to act, and I can find compassion for myself as well when I can't do what I would like myself to do. And that can be you can start with,
Oh, absolutely.
I should lose 10 pounds or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
And you can do the work on that. And you can find that it's okay that I don't lose 10 pounds. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to now just give up my self-care. It just means that I'm not going to push myself up. I'm not going to kill myself over it. I'm not going to stress myself.
Yeah.
And that easier hold is often more effective anyway.
For sure. Yeah. I think that's a great example. So we are coming to the end of our time here, and I've really enjoyed our conversation about the work and about your work. Please tell people again how to find you. I know we said it at the beginning of the podcast, but I know a lot of people skip the beginning. So can you tell people how to find you?
Okay. Yeah.
And your new podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Please come and join me. My podcast is called Wiggle Room, and you can find it wherever you find podcasts. You can also find it at theworkasmeditation.com, which is my website as well. You'll find there many of the programs, all of the programs that I offer, including the free open sessions, the Work 101, virtual retreats. I have a newsletter that I write every week, which is not just like a salesy newsletter, but I usually share something that's either going on for me or something with my clients, or some insight with how to do the work. So there's lots of resources there. If you're interested in the work of Byron Katy, check it out, theworkasmeditation.com.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to say your newsletter is fantastic. Like, it's actually one that I read. I don't just delete it. Like a lot of my newsletters, it's like delete, delete, delete. And it's like, oh no, one from Todd. I'm actually going to read this. So I really want to thank you for that. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And again, thanks for being on the podcast. I hope you truly enjoyed today's episode. Remember that you can get free hypnosis downloads over at my website, drlizhypnosis.com, DRLIZ hypnosis.com. I work all over the world doing hypnosis. So if you're interested in working with me, please schedule a free consultation over at my website, and we'll see what your goals are and if I can be of service to you in helping you reach them. Finally, if you liked today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast or tell a friend. That way, more and more people learn about the power of hypnosis. All right, everyone, have a wonderful week. Peace. This podcast is not mental health treatment, nor should it replace mental health treatment. If you need therapy or hypnotherapy, please seek treatment from a trained professional.